Good afternoon. This is Deanna Akra, and I am with KGNU, Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins. I am with Deborah Rowan, the writer of One Person Acted and Everything Changed, 10 Inspiring Accounts of World Changers. Thanks for joining me, Debbie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Deborah, you have been in the activism and motivational space for decades. Please tell me a little bit about your history and how you came to be the writer of this very inspirational book.
Thank you, Diana. I hadn't really thought of myself that way until you just introduced me as a motivator and activist. I think I took on the activist role more directly in the last 10 years or so, but I think I've always just cared very deeply about the world, about the people in the world, all my life. That must have manifested in a number of different ways. And I came upon One Person Acted. It grew out of a concern for the world and concern for where we're headed in the world. And while I've always cared and I always took on roles of, working in the Middle East that maybe we'll talk about, I think about 10 years ago, it hit me almost palpably, a physical feeling that we are not necessarily headed in the best of directions globally and locally. And so I just decided I wanted to take some action to not only educate people about some of the bigger issues going on in the world that we can no longer ignore, but also just to motivate them and excite them and show people that people can act and people can make a difference, and even one person, and especially one person, can change the world. Mm-hmm.
So this book is about 10 inspirational stories. How long did it take you to write the book?
I was just starting a nonprofit at the same time. About 4 years ago, in 2012, I started. And I really, with a friend of mine and a co-founder, started an organization. At the same time, I decided to investigate. That was geared toward the Middle East. At the same time, I wanted to broaden my horizons about things that are going on in the world. So I did them little, I wrote a little bit, but it took about 4 years because I actually interviewed close to 20 people in great depth and very great depth. And then at the very end, we took it from 15 down to 10 at the final edit to keep it a little more powerful, a little more precise. So yeah, it took a while. It really did.
Was that part of your general work that you were already doing in order to enhance your ability to run your organization, which is, by the way, Meet the Middle East, which you ran from 2012 up until just recently? Mm-hmm. You handed it to your co-founder or co-director, which is Aman Jodeh, who is also a Palestinian living in Denver. Was the intent to interview all these people part of your work already, or was it in your personal development, or what was your intent to expand?
I didn't see it as my work. I really saw Meet the Middle East as my work, which it was. This was more a love of wanting to inspire people, like I said, wanting a love of the world and a desire to preserve it and to preserve our democracy and to preserve the planet. And so I think it was more of a avocation. It was more of not a hobby. It was just a very, very deep interest that kept calling to me over and over again, saying, please. Because, one thing I discovered was that, and I don't know what drove me to look this up, but there were 1 million people a month Googling how to change the world, some form of that question. And I thought, well, a lot of people care, but nobody knows where to start. So, I thought, why not just start finding people? And actually, they kind of fell into my lap at the beginning, which coalesced into saying, well, I'm just going to write a book and tell other people about it.
Yeah, I definitely picked up this book and I thought, I do want to change the world. I'm trying to change the world. Am I changing the world? But I'm kind of tired.
Yeah.
And I'm only 30. And when I read the book, I was 30, just a few months ago. Maybe we could get into who these people are that you wrote about and what they did I know there's a lot, there's 10, but maybe you could just talk about the ones that come to your mind first, or the ones that are most important to you.
Well, I should start then with Katie Meiler, because she is the first person in the book, and she's the first person who I met who actually changed the way that I looked at the world, because she was just this very young girl. I mean, 22 or so when she got out of college, and she had so little to go on, so little education, and a pretty rough upbringing, and did not feel smart, did not feel confident, and was able to, in just a very short amount of time, change the face of Liberia, and to change the quality of life for all these girls that she had come across in Liberia who were unfortunately using prostitution just to stay alive, because they were orphaned from the wars, from the civil wars there. So what she has done, and she has taken this from finding just a few girls and getting them into school, off the streets and into school, to opening up a school, to now opening 500 schools and working arm in arm with the president of Liberia. And I thought, oh my goodness, really, what a role model, what an inspiration, what a life change for me, to know that really someone who I could relate to, even though I'm not 23, but I have those same feelings, but I don't think I felt like I had the power to do it. Mm-hmm. And she didn't necessarily either, but she had just a blind faith and a blind passion. And I'll talk about some of the other people in the book, but to a person, finding their purpose and finding their passion is really an overused term, but nevertheless, it still is the thing that they say sometimes, the thing that breaks your heart is your purpose. Mm. And that broke her heart, and that became her purpose. But everyone in the book, there's another man who was a National Geographic photographer for 17 years, and in all his work, he had seen so much. He'd come to almost a devastating realization that if we don't do something about the planet, there might not be a planet for our kids. Mm-hmm. And it moved him to leave National Geographic, leave the other high-level photography that he was doing for Fortune magazine and Time magazine, and just educate the people, just to use all his skills, which he has done in tremendous fashion, to educate people that we have to wake up. We have to take off our blinders. So he was another one.
Mm-hmm. And it's a big jump to be an activist, to devote your whole life to a certain cause. Feels like you have to give up everything. Sometimes people think, mm-hmm. I have to give away the money that I have is the biggest thing, because you're giving all your time and all mm-hmm. your resources away. Talk a little bit about why these people succeeded.
Well, I'm going to answer that in two parts, because the first thing is you definitely do not need to give away all your time and money. And the thing is, I think when I wrote this book, I showed people who did that. They changed everything. They left the country and moved to Liberia. They quit their job and devoted themselves to another mission. But we can incorporate it into our lives in so many different ways. And that's really the way that we will change the world, is to have people, eat a little less meat or drive a little bit less. Or it's going to take more than just simple measures, but it doesn't mean that everyone needs to completely abandon their livelihood. I mean, survival is our deepest need. That's why I do, and I, as you know, I teach these workshops, and what I want to encourage people to do is find their purpose, find the thing that makes you come alive, and then match it with something in the world, or at least incorporate. If you're a developer, for example, you don't need to clear cut a forest. You can buy reclaimed lumber. You can use ceiling tiles that are now solar panels. There's things you can think about it, and people are, definitely. So you said you were tired. It sounds like so much to change the world. And to say it that way is daunting, and it's probably too daunting to a lot of people and makes them not even want to start. So I do understand that. But I also understand that we have to care about things, and we just have to build them into our lives, whether it is our career or whether it's our hobby, or whether we just donate money to something that makes sense to us. But we have to care about it. Mm-hmm. There was another part of that I wanted to answer. I think you were asking about how do we tackle the whole big thing. One of the things I teach in these workshops is something I learned from Jack Canfield, which is, actually it's an exercise that I have people go through, which says, if I take 5% more responsibility for my life, for my planet, for my neighbor, what would that look like? And 5%, it just gets you moving. It's enough to get you off the dime. For example, you said I was an activist. I never thought I'm a gentle activist, if anything, because I'm a gentle person. So for me to be an activist seemed like it was completely contrary to my character. But my daughter's always been an animal rights activist, and she's also a gentle person. But she would stand out there by herself, holding a sign in front of a store and, against wearing fur. And so that was the first thing I did is got a sign, and it makes me cry. Because we learn so much from our kids. We learn so much from people who aren't afraid to act. And so she kind of got me past some of that. And our whole family became vegan, and but it just took me having to stand out there with the sign with her one time and have people honk, some in support, some yelling at you, and like, oh, this is actually not so scary, not so daunting. And then you just take a little bit more responsibility. So you build it in organically rather than saying, give it all up and do it at once.
Right. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, how these people were leaders. I said that. I said these people that are in this book, one person acted and everything changed. I was needing some leadership skills, I think, over the summer because I felt that I wasn't doing enough leadership. But then you said a little bit earlier that word wasn't something that you thought explained this book.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that?
Well, I imagine that they would now all consider themselves leaders, but I wasn't thinking about the people who were following them necessarily when I wrote about them. I was thinking about the actions they were taking as individuals, because that's where it starts. It's just one person acting. And I don't know that they knew anyone was actually going to follow them. One of my favorite stories in the book is Christopher Katrabonnet, who started Migrant Offshore Aid Station. He's an insurance salesman. He owns an insurance company. He's an American who moved to Malta off the coast of Italy and had an insurance company. It wasn't your standard insurance company. He worked to protect people who travel to dangerous places like Iraq and Afghanistan, journalists and business people, anyone who travels to war-torn areas or dangerous areas. So he insures them, and he had already had some experience with saving people medically and getting them out when they needed medical assistance and things like that. So he had a sensitivity to people. And then when he and his wife were yachting, he made a lot of money doing this. And then when he and his wife were on a yacht in the Mediterranean, taking a well-deserved vacation, they discovered a jacket floating in the middle of the Mediterranean and asked the captain what it was, how that could have gotten there. And that's when they stumbled inadvertently and probably unwillingly upon this disaster that's really taking place in our world, where refugees are drowning to escape North Africa and the Middle East, calling them migrants, because people who are like literally escaping to get to safety. And I don't think that he was looking to be a leader. I think he just thought, oh my, when he discovered this and people were drowning, trying to escape, well, the first thing we have to do is just pull them out of the water. It just seems so simple to him. Why are we letting them drown over politics and where are they going to get asylum? And let's just pull them out. So literal, I think that's what attracted me to him. And so they started doing that. And I don't think he was looking to be a leader. I think he was looking to solve a problem. And then people started like, yeah, let's help them. Now they have a large organization. So they took action that made them leaders. They have leadership qualities. There's this great talk on TED Talk, but I don't know why it's unusually short. It's just a few minutes, unlike usually they're like 18 minutes, I think. And there's a speaker who talks about the first follower being just as important as the first leader. And the idea behind that is that anybody can go off and do anything, and if no one follows them, they're just one person. But the first person who takes the risk and follows the leader is really the leader of in their own right, because the ones who come after are really following what that person did. So you need leaders and you need first followers, and then you always need the whole army behind you. But
good way to put it.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Right. So we can all be leaders.
We are.
All the time.
Yeah.
So I really liked the story about the rescue missions. Can you tell me his name again?
Yeah, it's Christopher Katrabane.
And of course, that's just one of the one of the main stories.
On the rescue theme, there's a lot about there's two stories about rescuing animals as well. And it's funny because some people, like someone asked me recently, well, why did you include animals in this book? People rescuing animals as changing the world, or helping protect farm animals, like with Nathan Runkle, who started Mercy for Animals. He has affected the lives of 1 billion animals. These are farm animals who just needed better treatment. They were being abused in some way. So he's gone up against Costco and Butterball and Nestle and DiGiorno and McDonald's and Burger King. I mean, all the biggest players. Walmart was one of his toughest ones, saying you have to buy from suppliers who are using humane treatment of animals. So he would like people to become vegan, but he's just taking steps and saying, let's at least treat animals humanely. And there's another one too, Scotland Hazley, who's an incredible man, and his is about rescue too, because he literally goes in and closes down puppy mills, and he goes with local authorities like the sheriff and different people to go into where there's hoarding cases, or sometimes there's illegal zoos, and there's a lot of things. He rescued Michael Vick's dogs when he was busted for dog fighting, and they were all chained up to tires and had to go out on Thanksgiving Day and break all the chains, and some huge operations, hundreds of animals in one day. They have to get them all out and get them treated. And so when someone says to me, like, why did you put animals in there if they're not an animal lover, for example, or don't see that on par with human, I like to take it back to the idea that you can't pick and choose. Like, we are one united world, whether it's the trees or the animals or the bees or the insects or people or which person. This is the Native American belief, is that we are all one, and you can't hurt one without hurting another.
I felt that when you just said Costco. Actually, I went to Costco like a week or so ago, and I felt bad.
Going there?
Yeah, I just feel bad. I feel, I just read a book about Native American spirit and culture, and I thought about all the hunting that they do and the necessity to respect your surroundings and nature. And then I went into Costco, and I looked at so much food, and it just kind of depressed me.
I can make you feel a little better about Costco because they changed all their... I'm not saying it's perfect, but that's one of the organizations he worked with, and challenged them, and they responded instantly to say, we're going to stop buying from people who raise the pigs, the sows, in these cages where they can't turn and they can't move, and that's their whole existence. And they immediately started taking out some of these practices. So they were extremely responsive, I guess, and now they have an ethics, a set of ethics that they use. But our whole society, and if I can just interject one other thing, there's a seminar that I teach. It's part of the Pachamama Alliance, and it's a free seminar, and I offer it to the public. And basically, we educate people about some of the different issues that are going on in the world, some of the more dire issues that we need to face. And it's something that I would like people to be aware of, that they can attend and go to these free workshops to sort of educate them about all these different issues that we're talking about.
Okay. Is that in Denver?
Yeah, I can go anywhere to do it. And there's a lot of people trained to do these workshops, but one of the things that they prepared in this presentation that I deliver is just talking about the connection between all things, and how it's so critical, and that in this country, your Costco story reminded me of this American dream is sort of turned into an American nightmare for the planet. And so this endless consumption and expansion of our economy just based on greater and greater consumption, which is really... We're living at the level of 4 Earths. Like, we're using the resources in the United States as though we had 4 Earths. We're living on a credit card, essentially. Wow. So that's why I think things like Costco, and nothing against Costco individually, anything where we're just consuming, and feeding that, it's really working against our own spirit and our own planet and our own selves, And so that's one of the things we talk about in there, is changing that American dream to maybe we can make things better instead of making more of everything.
Just want to remind you, we are with Deborah Rowan, the author of One Person Acted and Everything Changed. You are listening to Metro on KGNU, broadcasted in Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins. So this book spans everywhere from education to human rights to people living in poverty, animals, environment. Do you have a relationship with these people in the book, and do you ever collaborate on your work?
That's a great question, actually. Bernard Amadei started Engineers Without Borders USA, and he's in my book. And when he read it, he didn't really think about who else. He didn't know who else was in the book. He had kind of forgotten. I didn't even interviewed him, frankly, because it was a few years ago. So I met with him, and we sat down and just talked and talked and talked at such a great, deep level. And he realized that he had a hunger for connecting with other people who had done things like he had done. Like he was the founder of Engineers Without Borders in the U.S. And it had this just dynamic growth when he started, just almost an out-of-control growth that was very hard on him. And he had longed for this connection with other people, other activists, other people that were so concerned about the world. And some of the things that they, the people in this book have had to really face some very difficult situations. Like Katie Myler having to go back into Liberia when it was just Ebola was exploding. She didn't have to, but she chose to go back and was deep. In fact, she became one of Time Persons of the Year as an Ebola fighter because she closed down her school and wound up helping everyone to get through Ebola in a very tangible way. And it was very difficult. And Bernard Amadei had some real difficulties. He said it made him very upset about how we're spending so much money on the military and not on, that 2.5 billion people living on less than $2 a day or $2.50 a day. So when you do dive into the world at this level and you're seeing the real effects of climate change, and I mean to the point where people are having to give up their communities and move, they're becoming climate immigrants, actually. Yeah, immigrants, refugees is the word. And so you asked if I had a connection or, a relationship with them. I do have varying levels of relationships with different ones. Some I know very well and I connect with a lot. But I think there's a hunger among them to connect with each other, especially with some of them, or at least to connect with other people who share that deep concern for the world and who have faced some of the difficulties that they've had to face and go through and their work to make the world better.
What kind of connections could we see? I think I felt the deep connection myself when I read the book, because your book is very interactive. I feel like I wanted to go research things. I wanted to go read about them. I watched the documentary.
Racing Extinction?
Racing Extinction.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
I did.
Excellent.
Immediately, and told friends about it. And
good. That's exactly what the book's meant to do, so I'm thrilled to hear that.
Yeah. So just reading this book supported me in my quality of life, I think.
Oh, that warms my heart a lot. And I do think that there is a growing need for that connection among people who share these concerns. And it doesn't really matter which concern calls to you most deeply, just to know that it's almost you care or you don't care. And if you care, you want to be around other people who care, and you want to support one another, and you want to have their support, because some of these challenges, like global warming, or like, our growing difference between rich and poor, and our democracy challenges, and so many of the issues that we're facing in the world, they're big problems. And you lose momentum, you lose hope when you're alone. There's a tendency to. So it's something that calls for community. And like with Bernard Amadei, he was saying that's the good part. Like that's the part where you get the rest and you get to get restored. He always uses this analogy of being in the desert, and these other people, when he gets together with them, they're the oasis, and they're where he gets refreshed, and his heart and his soul and his spirit and his brain even, and gets restored and then goes on. And so he was wanting to create some type of gathering or club, or, we don't know. We're just tossing around ideas of where people can come together and share their deepest pain and also their great successes, and where they can collaborate, because it's all about collaboration in the end.
This would be maybe a good time to talk about the Palestinian story. Like all the other people in the book, they had dramatic setbacks. Maybe some would call them setbacks. I don't know if they called them setbacks. I know the Palestinian man in the book, what's his name?
Ra'ad Mu'allim.
Mu'allim actually means studied. in Arabic.
He's very studied.
Yeah, so
many degrees.
He was a professor and an educator in Palestine, and he wanted to change the situation of education in Palestine and to integrate colleges so that multi-faith could attend.
He's actually a Palestinian citizen of Israel. So he's Palestinian, and he was born after Israel became a state in 1948. He was born in the 60s, I think. As you know, many Palestinians left when Israel became a state and during the war of 1948. He was one of the lucky ones. He and his family were some of the few who remained on their land. And his challenge has been to get education for students of Palestinian origin who still consider themselves Palestinians, but just with Israeli citizenship, to be educated, have higher education, a college in the city of Nazareth and in the area of Galilee, which is a high percentage of Palestinians. That's where most Palestinians who live inside Israel proper live. And he has been now on a 20-year effort, which is not yet over. He's opened the college. He's had it closed. They've opened it. They've had it closed. They've had the president of Israel approve it. But something continues to happen. He is the example of persistence. If you're going to pick something that he did that is unique, he will not give up no matter what. And he has been through a lot.
And just to give our listeners some background, basically how Palestinian Arabs live in Israel as a state. They're the citizens of the state. They do not have access to higher education. How is that?
Well, that's actually not exactly accurate because, for example, he got his PhD at Tel Aviv University, and certainly they're allowed, they're citizens, and they're not allowed to serve in the military, but they are allowed to have, certainly not an equal rights at all, but they certainly, just like anyone here could go to a public university, they could go to a public university. The problem is that their culture is, for example, they're Muslim and Christian, so their holy days, and it is a religious society, would be on like a Friday and Sunday, depending whether they're Muslim or Christian. And Jews have their holiday on their holy day on Saturdays. So you've already got 3 days out of the week that don't really work together in a religious-based society, which Israel is. And just a lot of the customs and a lot of the women in the Palestinian areas are conservative, and their families don't want them to leave town and go move to another part of Israel and study. So, and Arabic is still their preferred language, and it's taught in Hebrew, and there's many reasons why it's difficult for them to leave. So they can get an education, but most of them tend not to. They tend to either leave the country and go study in Jordan or go study in Europe or somewhere. They don't come back. So that's another tough one. That was an important story too, and I'm glad you brought it up.
So I am Palestinian, but I'm American. My parents are Palestinian. So
that one spoke to you.
Yeah. So they moved to Jordan when they were in their teens. Actually, my father moved when he was much younger and became a Jordanian citizen in the first exodus of Palestinians. And then my mom was a refugee and stayed in Jordan for college, and then they came to the United States. So that one hit me quite a bit because I wanted to feel connected to that. And I actually contacted the universe, tried to contact him because I wanted to, if there is a college, I would like to go study there.
I will let him know that.
But I couldn't find it.
It was called Nazareth Academic Institute, and it's been opened and closed 3 times now. But they have achieved the goal of having the government say that there needs to be a school funded by the government, accredited by the government, that serves Palestinian Arab students. It may not be his college, or it may be, but he has reached the hurdle, and that was his goal.
Well, we are so happy to have you, Deborah, and thank you for joining us here on KGNU Metro.
Thank you.
And the book, once again, is called One Person Acted and Everything Changed.
Yeah, if they wanted to get the book, it's at onepersonacted.com/bookstore. It's also where my workshops are listed, and I have a blog. But also it's available on Amazon. It's at Tattered Cover. It's at Barnes & Noble. A number of places.
Ways to get it. And also, Deborah has monthly, sometimes bi-monthly workshops that are called One Person Acted. Thank you once again, Deborah.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Me too.